My Chemical Romance were formed by Gerard Way, Mikey Way, Matt Pellissier, and Ray Toro in Belleville, North New Jersey, not far from New York City. That's the where, but it was the when that was significant to how the band was formed. In 2001, a teenage Gerard Way was living in his mom's basement and working as an intern for Cartoon Network. Fresh out of art college, he was pitching a new idea for a cartoon there called The Breakfast Monkey. One Tuesday morning in September 2001, Way was on the ferry to Manhattan where he worked. What he saw that day changed not only his life, but the lives of millions more around the country and around the world. For Way, this moved him towards creativity as much as despair. Perhaps it was his close proximity to those horrific events that affected him deeply enough to say, art. I've got to get out of the basement. I've got to see the world. I've got to make a difference. So he did. That same week, he wrote Skylines and Turnstiles about the events of that traumatic day. Way called in some old friends, drummer Matt Pellissier and guitarist Ray Toro, who had both played in the band The Rodneys together and had been introduced to Way in the 90s. They arranged a practice in Pellissier's attic, but still needed a bassist. Gerard's younger brother Mikey was recruited on bass, despite barely being able to play because no one else was willing. But he ended up being the one who gave the band their name. Mikey worked at Barnes & Noble at the time and remembered seeing the title of a short story collection on the shelves by Trainspotting author Irvine Welsh. It was called Ecstasy: 3 Tales of Chemical Romance. In no time at all, born out of one of the most traumatic events in recent American history, one of the biggest, probably the biggest band of the era, and of emo had emerged. To find out how My Chemical Romance went on to leave a seismic impact not just on music, but on an entire generation, stick around to the end of this video. Look alive, sunshine. Welcome to Band History. You're here with me, Dr. Pumpkin Metal. Like many bands of this era, my first exposure, no pun intended, to My Chemical Romance was probably on the radio when I was a teenager. My gateway song, predictably, was their biggest hit, Teenagers. And there's a reason that it's still their most played track. I'd call it ironic to discover a core part of my taste in music as a teenager with a song condemning teenagers, but don't act like most of you probably didn't have the same experience. I've seen the analytics. MCR might have just ended up on top of the mountain when it comes to the greatest icons of emo. Despite the band never agreeing with being slapped with that label, and there being earlier examples of the genre, Way and Company distilled it and created an aesthetic that gave birth to the sound and social scene that I think most would agree serves as a snapshot of third wave emo as a whole. Looking back now, it's hard to overstate their influence. But the history of MCR was never smooth sailing. With their origins on that tragic day in 2001, there was, sadly, more trauma to come for the band, though it was never something they shied away from, either on stage or in their music. But to fully understand how My Chemical Romance took a moment of despair and turned it into a celebration complete with cheers, a parade, and lots of vampires, we need to take it back to the start of their story. Most of the other members of My Chemical Romance had a history of musicianship and performing, but the Way brothers' music experience was much more limited. Lead singer and songwriter Gerard Way grew up in New Jersey, and encouraged by his grandmother, he had originally planned to become a comic book artist and illustrator. But he still enjoyed performing, singing, and appearing in school productions. Oh my god, he was a theater kid, wasn't he? His youth was hardly idyllic, however, saying in a 2008 interview with Rolling Stone, "When I was 15, I got held up with a .357 Magnum, had a gun pointed at my head, and put on the floor execution style." This didn't dampen his optimism, though. "No matter how ugly the world gets or how stupid it shows me it is, I always have faith. The events after the attack, the moments of tragedy when people show their colors and pull together, have renewed my faith." Basically, he was saying the world is ugly, but individual people can be beautiful, and he would later write a song sharing that sentiment. Gerard went on to study at the School of Visual Arts in New York City and graduated in 1999, hoping to pursue a career in the comic book industry. All of which returns us to the fateful month of September, when Way and his hastily assembled crew gathered together in Pellissier's attic to record some songs. Those early rehearsals proved more than fruitful, producing a number of recordings referred to as the Attic Demos, which were eventually released on the 2013 compilation May Death Never Stop You. Their sound is very rough and leans heavy on the punk side of pop punk, influenced by New Jersey's post-hardcore scene at the time. But you can hear the potential, particularly in Way's committed vocals. Hey! My fucking hand, never be afraid again! With these demos in hand, the band went to Alex Saavedra, the owner of the independent NYC label Eyeball Records, who saw their potential and signed them. The band played their first show that October and continued working on material for the next few months while performing extensively. As they recorded more demos in March of 2002, specifically Vampires Will Never Hurt You, Saavedra suggested their music to Jeff Rickley, the lead singer of local scene mainstays Thursday. The band were big fans of Thursday and desperate for Rickley to produce their developing album. Unfortunately, Thursday were on tour, but that didn't seem to bother the band. According to Rickley, they said, That's okay, we checked your schedule, and you're free this week. So between 2 3-month tours, I had 10 days, and I had to go into the studio with them. Which is a pretty bold move for a band who went on to write a famous song about kids leaving him alone, but hey, I'm glad it worked out the way it did. In May 2002, the just 9-month-old band went straight into production of their debut album. They headed to Nada Studios in New Windsor, New Jersey. On the first day of recording, Rickley lost his driver's license, so he asked a friend to drive him to the studio. That friend, it turned out, was Frankie Iero, the lead singer and guitarist of a fellow New Jersey punk band called Pensy Prep. During the recording, Rickley would discuss the issues of the process with Iero, mainly that there were too many guitar parts, saying that I don't know what they're going to do when they start playing live. This is crazy. They need another guitar player. This eventually became, dude, I think you should be in the band. So by the end of that week, Iero had joined the band. That studio they would all drive to was described as a shoebox, located in the basement of the sound engineer's mom's house. In addition to no living space, a lost driver's license, and a tiny studio, they had just 7 days to record the whole album on zero budget. But it seems like they had a lot of fun with it. As Saavedra said at the time, we were rushed, we had no money, but we had a great time. Ray Toro confirmed, I loved it. I wish we had more time, but it was still awesome. Due to time constraints and his belated recruitment, Iero was actually only credited on 2 songs. Yet, somehow, this hasty and chaotic approach worked. The album was written, recorded, and finished in a week. But as a new band with little to no audience at the time, the question loomed. What were they going to do with it? If you were online during the peak Panic at the Disco era, you've probably seen your fair share of LiveJournal meltdowns and leaked demos on LimeWire labeled final mix real.mp3 that were absolutely not final or real. But somehow, the internet has only gotten more invasive since then. These days, it's harder to find companies that aren't selling your personal browsing data to anyone that'll pay for it than those who are. And don't even get me started on data security when using public Wi-Fi. Even things that you thought were safe, like login creds and debit card numbers, can be intercepted with ease. That, and also other reasons, are why I use NordVPN. It helps protect your online activity by encrypting your internet traffic and hiding your IP address so that your data doesn't get passed around like a burned CD in the Warped Tour parking lot. Whether you're on public Wi-Fi, traveling, or basically doing anything that you don't want the whole world to see, like deep diving emo history at 2 a.m., NordVPN keeps your browsing private and secure across all your devices. It's fast, easy to use, and honestly just nice to have when you don't want to feel like you're being watched by 40,000 of your biggest fans. So if you want to protect your digital life, and maybe your dignity, go to nordvpn.com/pumpkinmetal and use code pumpkinmetal to get a huge discount on NordVPN plus bonus months for free. That's the first time I've ever said a Pumpkin Metal discount code. That's nordvpn.com/pumpkinmetal and use code pumpkinmetal. On July 23rd, 2002, less than a year after forming and less than 3 months after writing and recording it, My Chemical Romance's first album, I Brought You Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love, was released. This is one of the great debut albums. It's 41 minutes of raw energy and emotion, told through some of the most visceral lyrics you'll ever hear.
That's if you still got one that's left inside that cave you call a chest.
Even from this first release, all the ingredients that would go on to make MCR such a sensation were there. But like a lot of artists who innovate, it wasn't a hit. Sales were low despite their label's support. Saavedra handed their music to local radio stations, journalists, and DJs. The original run of CDs was limited to just 100 copies, which were sold at the record release show at the Loop Lounge in Passaic, New Jersey. Most of the CDs sold that night were misprints and featured 12 tracks of an unknown mariachi band and 0 tracks of MCR, which was probably disappointing for the band, but I kinda wish reaction videos existed at the time because it would have been f***ing hilarious. The band promoted the album by playing a run of shows at dive bars and basements across New Jersey, utilizing the state's legendary punk rock community to help them build some momentum. They also used the new world of social media by posting free downloads of their music to Pure Volume and MySpace. This strategy worked, with their MySpace page gaining them more than 100,000 fans. Everyone say thank you to Tom. Thank you, Tom.
I know you guys have been on tour for a really long time, and you're going to be on tour for another really long time. I don't know if you guys have any, stories from tour, I don't know, maybe if you go to strip clubs or anything while you're on the road.
Yeah, there's really not any stories because as far as the stuff like that, we're not like a Motley Crue-ish type band like that.
Do you want to be like a Motley Crue type band? Are you heading in that direction?
I think we want to play a lot of video games and collect a lot of toys.
More than anything else though, it was the music that caught people's attention. Straddling the line between the older genres of the time like post-hardcore and punk rock, the addition of Way into Iero's raw, screaming vocals set them apart from more polished acts in their field. They're more, there's no better way of saying it, emotionally driven compared to similar bands. Way's delivery on early sets over Monroeville is nothing short of visceral. You could say they were able to get away with a certain level of sloppiness. Some songs speed up or slow down, Mikey's bass is buried in the mix, and even the print itself had noticeable mistakes. Considering that their later work was much cleaner, the roughness around the edges was no doubt the product of the haste in which it was recorded, but I kind of feel like it added character and made the songs more distinctive. Like you're right there struggling in the basement with them. But while plenty of bands have recorded demo-like debut albums, few have captured such a storybook atmosphere with their lyrics. During the production of the album, Rickley noticed that Gerard was struggling to come up with lyrics, and knowing the young frontman's previous desire to be a comic book author, suggested he treat the lyrics like he was writing a story. Inspired by this idea, Way went back to the piles of notebooks he had kept as a teenager, filled with short stories and comic book concepts, and reinterpreted them into his lyrics. With songs about turning into a vampire and zombie lovers, this turned the album into more than just a collection of songs. It became, to some fans at least, something like a concept album. The main story of the album is believed to follow a Bonnie and Clyde-like couple known as the Demolition Lovers, with drowning lessons being the most obvious example, where the lovers die in a hail of bullets at the end. The album's title, I Brought You Bullets, You Brought Me Your Love, has further cemented this reading in a lot of fans' minds, but there's been no outright confirmation from the band about this. This narrative approach not only engaged listeners, but helped in an introverted way express what he needed to through the music, saying it's almost like method acting. Other songs in the album gave a glimpse into what would become major struggles for the frontman, with my personal favorite, Head First for Halos, and Honey This Mirror Ain't Big Enough for the Two of Us being the most explicit examples of Way expressing darker, personal themes. Vampires Will Never Hurt You was a song the band were notably the most proud of. It was the greatest thing we'd ever f***ing heard. We piled into the van and drove home afterwards, and we couldn't stop listening to it. It was just the loudest, gnarliest, darkest, most melodic song I'd ever heard. It was f***ing amazing. As a result, it was the first single released. It was one of the free MySpace downloads, and it was their first track to get significant radio play. To support this, the band made a no-budget music video to accompany it.
Someone get me to the doctor. Someone get me to the church.
There's no plot to speak of, despite this occasional cutaway to this boy and girl. Instead, it's the band crammed together, performing the song in a tiny hand-built set with painted windows that wobble when they move too much. The set design is a clear homage to German Expressionism, the post-World War I black and white film movement that was born out of Germany being broke after the war, and gave us some horror classics like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu. If you're a film nerd like me, realizing that Gerard embraced the idea of a low-budget vampire flick on the heels of political turmoil because that's exactly what F.W. Murnau did with Nosferatu is really cool. The next single released was Honey This Mirror Isn't Big Enough for the Two of Us, with an accompanying music video that still retained the DIY, low-budget production of vampires, but was considerably more ambitious. It's an attempt at remaking the 1999 Japanese horror film Audition, where a man auditions women to be his wife, only to have the one he chooses get revenge and torture him. This is intercut with footage of the band playing the song crammed together in a tiny filming studio. If nothing else, these two videos are incredible time capsules that take us back to a day before the insane VFX productions of Falling in Reverse and Ice Nine Kills. All of this went a long way to the band finding an admittedly small but loyal following. Kerrang! Magazine spotted the potential MCR had with a contemporary review of Bullets, saying, "My Chemical Romance are astonishing, and they're going to be huge." And though it would take a little time, they weren't wrong. Their next steps were going to be the ones that changed everything for the band. Though limited in its reach, the band's popularity maintained them through the next year, performing on the local scene and enjoying positive word of mouth. Slowly but surely, they gained attention, until, on August 31st, 2003, the band announced that they had signed to the label Reprise. And as there always is when an indie band signs to a major label, there were accusations of selling out, but Way preempted that criticism with a statement on the band's website that read, "We will always be an Eyeball Records band. The support, dedication, and love from that label got us to where we are right now, and we did it as a family." But they also declared a greater ambition as a band, saying, "Things are about to change for all of us. We are ready for the world to hear us scream." 2 months later, MCR went into the studio to record the follow-up album to Bullets.
I don't want to make it. I just wanna.
Relocating from their native New Jersey to sunny California in October of 2003, the band began recording in Bay 7 Studios, hiring veteran metal producer Howard Benson, who had worked on records by Motorhead and Sepultura. The band's initial choice, Butch Vig of Nirvana fame, was unavailable, but the pairing of Benson and MCR turned out to be a good one, though initial impressions weren't always favorable. When Benson first arrived at the studio, the band thought that he was the pizza delivery guy. He was often referred to as sports coach in the studio thanks to his constant communication through basketball metaphors. Reminds me of this 11th grade history teacher I had who started off every lesson with the pregame show. Benson challenged the band frequently, asking why they needed extra guitar solos and abrupt endings, saying they confused the out of him. Benson favored a more conventional approach to song structure, which might have rubbed the band the wrong way, but it was a massive plus in the end, turning the record from more of the same into something more commercially viable. You can debate if it's a good thing or not, but a major label's backing also meant higher pressure to succeed with greater expectations. With Benson's guidance, the record was steered into more of a pop territory, but there was no watering down the band's sound. Compared to the first album, the recording process was done at a glacial pace, taking 5 months as opposed to 1 week, spanning from October 2003 to February 2004. The extra time yielded an absolute classic. On June 8, 2004, 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge was released. There is a defined story on this one, but it's a bit looser than the rock operas that they would go on to write. There are 0 misses, and it's definitely their moodiest album. And listeners agreed, with 3 Cheers receiving widespread praise on release. Where Bullets was barely reviewed when it came out, and only picked up a few retrospective appraisals a year or so later, 3 Cheers received immediate praise from reviewers, appeared on multiple end-of-the-year best albums lists, and was listed platinum by the RIAA within a year. This was undeniably the band's breakthrough moment, and the start of the band's rise to becoming stadium-filling rock icons. The rough around the edges quality of Bullets is replaced by a more concise and pristine sound. Though still aggressive and rooted in emotion, it's more approachable than its predecessor. The convoluted song structure and wandering melodies are also gone in favor of big choruses and singable tunes. 3 Cheers is a grab-you-by-the-throat record from minute 1, and the whole band noticeably stepped up their musicianship. Well, all except for one member. Just a month after the album's release, Pelissier was replaced on drums by Bob Breyer. There's still some debate around the reasons for Pelissier's departure, and given that the band still weren't that big by that point, it was probably assumed that nobody would notice the switch, so no explanation was given. Despite this, rumors have claimed that he would make mistakes live, and his fluctuating time on the first album supports this theory. Finding a consistent drummer would be an issue for this band, but Breyer would stay on for the next 2 records. The album was also a step up conceptually, having a clearer and more developed theme. According to Way, the concept for the record 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge was the story of a man and woman who are separated by death in a gunfight, and he goes to hell only to realize by the devil telling him that she's still alive. The devil says that you can be with her again if you bring me the souls of 1,000 evil men. So he hands him a gun and he says, I'll go do it. That's the narrative at least, but there was a more personal influence on the record's theme too. Gerard and Mikey's grandmother, Elena, who had been the boys' strongest supporter and encouraged them in their creative endeavors, passed away in 2003. The opening track, Helena, is about that loss, and Way even conceded, every single emotion you go through when you're grieving is on revenge. When you really break down the record, it's about 2 little boys losing their grandmother. This narrative strength, driven by personal emotions that Gerard was going through at the time, made the album stand out. It's what fans old and new still respond to most, even after 20 years. The album's release was supported by 3 singles, the first of which, I'm Not Okay, I Promise, was a statement of intent for the band. With a huge sing-along chorus that would be the first of many to speak to a whole generation of people about how isolated and left out they felt, the original music video, it was decided, didn't match its scale, so they were gonna have to go big. The original video was simply live footage of the band intercut with photos of the Way brothers as children. But shortly after Breyer joined the band, a whole new video was made. This time with fledgling director Mark Webb, who would go on to direct 500 Days of Summer, Masterpiece, and the Amazing Spider-Man movies. They're fine. The idea for the video started out as the band playing at a pep rally as an homage to the Wes Anderson movie Rushmore. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but Jimmy Eat World also did a Wes Anderson homage in 2004. Their video for Pain reenacts the Royal Tannenbaums. But instead of sticking with that idea, director Mark Webb suggested that they expand the scope and turn it into a mock trailer for a John Hughes-style high school dramedy. Every MCR fan has it memorized. You like D&D, Audrey Hepburn, Fangoria, Harry Houdini, and croquet. You can't swim, you can't dance, and you don't know karate. Face it, you're never gonna make it. I don't wanna make it. I just wanna... The band stars as a group of preppy nerds who don't fit in at the academy, and they're bullied by the jocks. They get back at them via a series of pranks that culminates in a showdown in the halls of the school, which we never actually see, because it's just a trailer.
You know? You have something in your eye.
I did try that on a girl one time just because I always wanted to, and yeah, she was pissed. The I'm Not Okay video got heavy rotation on MTV too. YouTube was still a year away at this point, and it wouldn't become the main hub for music videos for a long time. So this kind of airplay and praise was a huge leap forward in the band's profile. It also encapsulated what the band were about, appealing to those who felt like outsiders and loners, like teenagers feeling alienated in a world that was changing rapidly in the wake of that disaster in New York City at the start of the decade. He probably didn't know it at the time, but Gerard was well on his way to achieving that goal of making a difference. This single was followed up by the single and music video released for the opening track, Helena, which was more like the My Chemical Romance of old. The music video brought back Mark Webb as its director and the high production value that came with him, telling the simple story of a young woman's funeral, with Way on the pulpit accompanied by a group of dancers. The woman comes back to life in an imagined revival before she falls back into the coffin and is marched out to the hearse by the band. It features dances choreographed by one of the industry leaders, award winner Michael Rooney, which, combined with the black, white, and red costumes, gives it a classic old Hollywood feel. The video was shot on location in Los Angeles' Emmanuel Presbyterian Church, and the band emailed fans to ask if they wanted to be in the video, resulting in an almost full church of extras. All of this gave it an even bigger scale than the budget might have allowed, a fitting tribute to the Way brothers' grandmother, who the song was written for. But even this couldn't have prepared anyone for the scope of the next video. The third single, The Ghost of You, was released in August of 2005 alongside a video that, at the time, was one of the most expensive music videos made, and it is epic. With Mark Webb returning once more to direct the video, Ghost of You is an all-out war movie in micro. Set during the Second World War, the video starts with the band performing at a USO show, where we see soldiers dancing with their partners, then, later, hanging out and drinking with their buddies. This is intercut with gritty, high-contrast footage of the soldiers storming the beaches at Normandy on D-Day. We soon realize that these are the same soldiers. We see them before they're deployed and watch as one of them is cut down on the beach with Gerard looking on. That part where the waves crash onto the dance floor and transition us to the battlefield scene is so keynote. Incredible job, Mark Webb. Inspired by the movie Saving Private Ryan, the whole video looks like it could be a cutscene from the film. Consequently, the video was a hit, both commercially and critically, with commentators describing it as cinematic and intense, and it became the third most played video on MTV2 the month after it was released. These music videos and the album's high-quality ambition pushed My Chemical Romance into the mainstream. This meant that they didn't just reach a wide audience, but a passionate one. A generation of disaffected teens, stunned by terrorism and a new war in the Middle East, were looking for a voice. And MCR, with their unapologetically heavy, emotionally raw approach, became that voice, just as Gerard had imagined 2 years prior. The weight of all that expectation, however, and Way's own aversion to the spotlight, would have a different kind of impact on the band themselves. In 2005, the 28-year-old Gerard Way and his band of misfits were riding high. They were grappling with the oxymoron of the term pop punk, but there was also another conversation bubbling. We've used the term emo quite liberally here so far because that's the term most often used to describe what My Chemical Romance was doing, but it's actually a term that the band themselves rejected. Way stated in an interview with University of Maine's newspaper, The Maine Campus, "I think emo is f***ing garbage. It's bullshit. I think there's bands that unfortunately we get lumped in with that are considered emo, and by default, that starts to make us emo. All I can say is anyone actually listening to the records, put the records next to each other and listen to them, and there's actually no similarities." I don't know if that's a totally fair assessment. He's right that 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge doesn't have a lot in common with the original emotive hardcore punk rock movement that saw the rise of bands like Rites of Spring and Minor Threat, but music evolves, and like any genre, the original movement shifted towards pop over time. In the 2000s, when I was getting into this stuff, it was generally understood that there were 3 waves. The original emo-core scene in Washington, D.C. in the 80s, the second wave Midwest emo scene with bands like Sunny Day Real Estate and Jimmy Eat World in the 90s, and the third wave was emo pop punk in the 2000s, with bands like Fall Out Boy, Paramore, and of course, My Chemical Romance. Generally, the reason it's considered a new wave and not a new subgenre is because bands often cited influence from previous waves, but that wasn't the case for MCR. It should be noted that emo is not all about being sad or depressed. The umbrella punk rock subgenre was known for themes of rebellion and political defiance, while emo lyrics tended to be about personal struggles. I think the genre got unfairly associated with depression and melodrama by people who don't actually listen to it. And Way's openness in his lyrics, the band's undisguised struggles with mental health, alcoholism, and substance abuse, and just the lyrics "I'm not okay" didn't help quell the stigma. Whether they liked it or not, after the success of 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, MCR were representatives of that movement, and it wasn't a responsibility they were going to take lightly. With the success of the second album, invites from other artists rolled in. They collaborated with The Used on a cover of the Queen song Under Pressure as a charity single for tsunami relief. If you're not familiar with it, it has gained notoriety as being a legendary moment in emo because both bands really put their personal stamp on it. Despite it being a cover, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. Like, I've seen people do a cover of this cover specifically. MyChem were then invited on the Taste of Chaos tour alongside The Used and Killswitch Engage. They also did an incredible cover version of the Mariah Carey holiday hit, All I Want for Christmas Is You. Again, it transforms the original into MCR's style, and in my opinion is the best version of this song. Again, this was pretty iconic. I once went to a Christmas emo night themed around this song specifically. Immediately afterwards, Green Day asked them to be their opening act for their wildly successful American Idiot tour. If 3 Cheers had launched MCR's popular recognition, this tour was the jet fuel that pushed them into the stratosphere. This was because American Idiot was a bona fide hit. The punk rock opera was #1 in the Billboard charts in the USA and 18 other countries. It won 2 Grammys, it was certified 6 times platinum by the RIAA, and on and on. As a result, this tour was a huge deal, and MCR were opening it. You have to wonder if being a part of that left an imprint on Gerard, something that would be present in the next album. With all eyes now on the band, they co-headlined the 2005 Warped Tour with, who else? Fall Out Boy. MCR maintained this momentum by going back on another tour, co-headlining with the Alkaline Trio and Reggie in the Full Effect. It was also around this time that the band received a now infamous bottling at Reading Festival in 2006. This was before my concert-going days, but apparently throwing bottles was kind of a rite of passage that a lot of festival goers subjected bands to back in the day. Prior to MCR taking the stage, Slayer had just been on, so a lot of people in the crowd were unhappy with MCR being considered top billing. On top of that, Way goaded the crowd, telling them to throw more. Throughout this non-stop touring schedule, the band were writing material for a follow-up, and it was going to influence what they wrote in a big way. It was also around this time that a certain rumor began to circulate in the fan community on websites like LiveJournal and fanfiction.net about a certain ship within the band. Referred to as Gerard, this was the belief by some fans that there was a secret relationship going on between Gerard and Frankie Arrow. This was where it started, but it became a bigger part of fan lore later in MCR's history, so we'll come back to that. Along with everything else going on in the world at the time, streaming and downloading music had also exploded. The record industry, in response, was desperate to keep people buying CDs. As a result, this became the era of multi-disc sets. My Chemical Romance were no exception. Early 2006 saw the release of Life on the Murder Scene, a triple-disc retrospective that included 2 DVDs that told the story of the band so far, along with live footage, behind-the-scenes content, and music videos. We also got 2 of their best songs from this era that don't get enough love, Bury Me in Black and Desert Song. Despite being a 5-year-old band with only 2 albums under their belts, there was plenty of archival footage, and they certainly had a story to tell. A story that was about to get even bigger. On April 10th, 2006, My Chemical Romance went into the studio at Paramore Mansion to record their 3rd album with super producer Rob Cavallo. Having just toured with Green Day, hiring their main producer seemed like a logical next step if MCR wanted to step up another level and achieve a similar kind of success. The band knew expectations were high going into their 3rd album, but almost as many people were waiting to see them fail. They saw it as pretentious, cynical, and in some cases, dangerous. My Chemical Romance were on the receiving end of that hatred. It was a boiling pot that would spill over with the release of their next album. By all accounts, the band's time recording their 3rd album was not an easy one, with most of the members made uneasy by the ghosts of the supposedly haunted mansion they were recording in. With only about a third of the material they needed for the album written, the band struggled to write new songs. In the middle of recording, Way broke up with his long-term girlfriend, adding more fraught emotions into the production. But after 5 months in the studio, and a breakthrough in songwriting that involved producer Cavallo showing the band a certain piano piece that he'd written, the album was almost complete. The band took the tracks and shot 2 music videos during the album's production, implying that they already had a clear idea of the presentation of the album. The title was announced at a one-off sold-out show at the Hammersmith Palace in London that August. The record would be titled The Black Parade. The band then performed the lead single at the MTV Awards and Saturday Night Live and released it for streaming on the meaningful date of September 11th, 2006. The music video for the single, Welcome to the Black Parade, dropped a few days later. Shot by legendary music video director Samuel Bayer, the man behind Nirvana's iconic Smells Like Teen Spirit promo, this was a signal to both critics and fans how far they were willing to take their music. The video told the story of the patient, the central character of the album, laid in bed and reaching for a screen that shows the band performing on a carnival float, followed by a parade of people dressed in white masks. Together, they march through the ruins of a desolate wasteland. The hospital walls then fall away from the patient as he's forced to wander the same wasteland before being awarded a medal by the band and their parade. These visuals, combined with a more intricate composition, harmonies reminiscent of the 70s, and a standout vocal performance from Way, created something completely different to what anyone expected from the former leather-clad emo rock band. The single and video were both a hit, with the music video being voted greatest video of the century by an MTV viewers poll. Welcome to the Black Parade's scope and ambition were applauded, but few knew at the time just how intricate the production was. On October 23rd, 2006, the Black Parade was released, and even at the time you could feel its impact. I've never been so invested in the story, music videos, characters, visuals, and fanfare surrounding an album before. Clearly inspired by their time with Green Day, the record was a classic concept album, a rock opera with a central narrative, character, characters and consistent imagery throughout. The narrative story of this one is one of the most imaginative you'll ever find. The album starts, ironically, with the end. It follows the story of the patient, the main character of the album, on his deathbed, as he deals with the idea that some people will celebrate his death because he was a bad person, singing lyrics like, "I'd encourage your smiles, I'll expect you won't cry." In the next track, Dead, the patient flatlines, and there's the famous celebration, the eponymous Black Parade. This is tied to the idea that Gerard had heard about the afterlife coming in the form of the person's happiest memories. In the lyrics, there are lines from other recurring characters like Mother War, the patient, and the doctor, who all play a part in his coming to terms with his own situation. In How I Disappear, the lyrics allude to the patient's moral shortcomings. But he sings about one upside. At least he can't cause any more harm now that he's gone. Sharpest Lives is the patient reflecting on his destructive lifestyle and using the image of vampires as a metaphor for people who are corrupted by their vices. A theme that would come to life in the real world when Paramount would come calling, looking for a song about their Twilight movie. But we'll get to that later. After this comes the famous, almost title track, Welcome to the Black Parade, in which the patient remembers a happier time before wars and substance addiction, but still demonstrates an unbreakable spirit in famous lyrics like, I Don't Love You is the patient reflecting on one past relationship in particular that never worked out. The one that got away is understandably the relationship that comes to mind when he looks back on his life. Moving right along, in House of Wolves, things get heated as the Black Parade takes the patient to what is essentially the afterlife's version of the gates of hell, where he's forced to grapple with those sins from his life, first mentioned in How I Disappear. The lyrics talk about contrition, sin, and burning in hell. Gerard pictured hell as a seedy bar in the afterlife, perhaps reflecting on an unhappy personal memory. Then, a slow piano song, Cancer, jumps back from the afterlife to his memories of reality. The song reflects on his cancer diagnosis, which is physically painful, and the despair, the emotional pain of realizing that he'll never get to finish out the life that he started. After that, we've got a personal highlight of the album, Mama, whose lyrics take the form of a letter written to the patient's mother during the war. He's afraid for his life and regrets those horrible things that he had to do as a soldier. It's not like the glamorized propaganda that we see in the movies and on TV, where the military guys are made out to be noble heroes. The track features Liza Minnelli in a nod to her role as the burlesque performer Sally Bowles in the movie Cabaret, set during the rise of fascism in Germany. She plays the character Mother War.
And if you would call me your sweetheart, I'd maybe then sing you a song.
It's a tour de force of a track and spells out the themes of the record, not just in its lyrics, but in its iconography and metatextual references. The next track, Sleep, is a narrative follow-up to Mama. Set in a post-war period, patient deals with PTSD and night terrors, believing he can never come back from all the horrible things he did and saw. The next track deviated from the album's story, but it would become one of the biggest songs of all time. Track 11, Teenagers, is probably the least directly tied to the album's story, though you could read it as how society treats the young and how it can push you into a life of being a sinner. However, as you're probably aware, it's told from the perspective of a narrator who's frightened by the way that teens behave, referring to them as another cog in the murder machine. The narrative crisis point, Disenchanted, takes place after reliving all of his memories, where the patient realizes what a disappointment his life has been, having achieved nothing but his sins. He sees his existence as a lifelong wait for a hospital stay. That's the story up until the climax, and this finale's meaning would be hotly debated. One of the most impactful tracks on the MCR fandom, Famous Last Words, is, according to the liner notes, the final track of the Black Parade and declares the celebration to be over. What we hear is the band playing in its ruins. The ending is left deliberately ambiguous, with lyrics like "I am not afraid to keep on living" being debated amongst fans about whether that means that the patient is resuscitated and continues his life, or if it's merely about him moving on from the traumas of his time among the living. It's generally agreed that the song is about letting go of the guilt that he carries from his time in the war and his time as a degenerate and moving on to the next life, despite what any critics might say about it. But then there's Blood, the secret track at the very end of the record. I view this as sort of a post-credit scene to the story, a sarcastic little tune about the patient's time in the hospital. Along with the deliberate visuals and costuming of the marching band, the masked followers, and James Jean's memorable artwork, this album is a kaleidoscope experience that seemed to draw in everything about society and culture at the time. While MCR deserves credit for pulling off something so ambitious, there are clear influences, both direct and indirect. fact. The band's recent tour with Green Day promoting their own high-concept album, American Idiot, was obviously an influence, given that MCR even hired their producer, but one of the most quoted influences on the music is Queen. Those tinkling pianos that appear throughout the album certainly have echoes of Freddie Mercury's own playing, but it's really Toro's guitar playing here that cements the comparison. Where he isn't using techniques popularized by Queen's guitarist Brian May, he outright quotes his solos, like in I Don't Love You. And then there's the Beatles influence. Those marching band uniforms, the idea of the band taking on another identity to fit the story of the album, and even the sound design and production effects harken back to the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. There was a reason that the album was referred to at the time as Emo Sgt. Pepper. The Black Parade had a massive effect on culture, for both good and bad. While the band's fan base and the scene at large went wild for the album, there was some pretty grisly backlash to its success. Some critics complained that it was all just music for Hot Topic kids and angsty kids complaining about nothing. But a now infamous article printed in the British paper The Daily Mail conflated emo music, specifically the music of My Chemical Romance and their new album The Black Parade, with the death of a young teenager. Titled Why No Child is Safe from the Sinister Cult of Emo, it proudly condemned the band and their music for encouraging self-harm and violence. Much like the narrative of video games cause real violence or the satanic panic of the 80s, this wasn't a credible argument, and fans responded by arranging a march on the paper's headquarters in support of the band. But this was cancelled the days before due to safety fears. One of the most memorable aspects of the Black Parade was its visual continuity, its narrative through line maintained in the album art, live concerts, and especially the music videos. The next one released was for the single Famous Last Words and was also directed by Bayer. The band are in the same costumes as the previous video, though dirtied and covered in dust, with the burning wreckage of the parade float and other props behind them. It helps that this video was probably filmed concurrently with the other one, but it encouraged a deeper reading of the album's aesthetics, as well as its lyrical content from the audience. Despite a lot of environmental storytelling, the video has no explicit story, simply depicting the band performing the song amongst the wreckage. On the other hand, there was a lot of story behind the scenes. The band were surprised by the amount of flames on set, and their worry turned out to be justified. Despite having a protective jelly put on them, Breyer sustained second and third degree burns due to the proximity of the fire in the final shot. Gerard Way also tore muscles in his leg after being tackled by Iero while kneeling down, putting him in the hospital for several days after. All of this resulted in the cancellation of 2 live dates. These 2 Bayer-directed videos, shot in 2 days by the way, show just how committed the band were to the narrative idea behind the project. For their third single, I Don't Love You, Mark Webb returned as director. And though it changes the aesthetic of the previous videos, with Way's hair back to black, there's still an effort to fit the Black Parade's story.
I don't love you like I loved you yesterday.
The story is of 2 lovers, one painted and dressed in black and the other in white, whose love withers away, represented by the tree that they meet by, until they fall apart, represented by the shattering of the band's instruments. This is intercut with performance shots and shots of the members falling through the sky. Shot in black and white, it adds to the monochrome, dreamlike imagery of the rest of the album, and serves as a flashback to the patient's life, whereas the other 2 videos took place in the Black Parade, aka in the afterlife. Then there's Teenagers, MCR's most streamed song and certainly their most lyrically direct. The video was nominated for an NME award that year, and for good reason. Starting with the band performing in a school gym with dancing cheerleaders, it's already making a statement by having the stage dressed in large red curtains and the title in black letters. It's reminiscent of Pink Floyd's animated videos for The Wall, due to a similar theme and mid-20th century fascist iconography. The band seemed to be directly responding to the accusations that they're a bad influence by adopting the appearance of historical figures that really did have bad intentions. With the stage literally set, the titular teenagers burst through the locked door and watch, as if this were part of some bizarre school assembly. Cheerleaders put on gas masks and pull out truncheons. As the second chorus kicks in, the curtains drop, revealing symbols of nuclear explosions. The crowd thrust their fists in the air, an echo of a fascist salute. After rocking out to the guitar solo, they all rush the stage amid an explosion of confetti and overpower the band, stealing their instruments. Writing a sing-along anthem about gun violence with the chorus, "Teenagers scared the living shit out of me," to be sung by an audience of teenagers at their concerts, that is an incredible accomplishment. The video ends with a plea for reaching out rather than acting out violently, with a link to nationalsave.org. Despite the song and video not having a lot to do with the overall narrative of the patient, it is still a strong message and an outright rejection of the criticism that the band had received up to that point. The last video released for the Black Parade was, surprisingly, for the hidden track Blood, though it wasn't released until 2014 for the deluxe edition re-release. We'll get to that. But the Blood video was not part of the original album cycle. This was another song with a critical message about the price of fame and the cost of love and adoration. The video could take place immediately after the video for Teenagers. The band enter a gym locker room and are followed by the same cheerleaders from the previous video. It's nothing special as a video, but again, it shows a commitment to consistency by the band. As of writing, the album is about to celebrate its 20th anniversary, and it has only grown in notoriety in the years since. Romance. Yeah, it's been overplayed, overanalyzed, and over-sensationalized, but make no mistake, the Black Parade has stood the test of time. The band wasn't satisfied with just following up their breakout album with a new and improved sound. Instead, they created an entire world of storytelling, complete with characters, mystical locations, and lore. But on top of that, it had something to say, and it said it in the most creative way possible. Its legacy is assured, thanks not just to the quality of the music or its accompanying visuals, but the social impact that it had. Now, I do have to address, it's one of my favorite albums of all time, but I am a little tired of the Black Parade in 2026. It's attracted a fan base outside of the actual MCR fan base, and it just gets grating hearing Welcome to the Black Parade and teenagers at every emo night, while you know what they do to guys like us in prison and Headfirst for Halo sit in purgatory. But that doesn't change the fact that the Black Parade completely changed the game and set a new standard for narrative rock opera that still hasn't been reached again today. It's honestly insulting that it hasn't been adapted into a movie yet. The Black Parade is My Chemical Romance's magnum opus. The only problem the band had was, after such a creative and commercial success, where do you go next? The years following the Black Parade were dominated by touring, kicking off on February 22nd, 2007 with the Black Parade World Tour. This was a tour where they performed as their alter ego, the Black Parade, opening for My Chemical Romance. James DeWeese from the group Reggie and the Full Effect joined them on keyboards for the tour, and he would go on to join the band full-time thereafter. That April, bassist Mikey got married and took an extended break. He was temporarily replaced by Matt Cortez. In 2007, they joined Linkin Park on the Project Revolution tour with Placebo, Taking Back Sunday, and Mindless Self-Indulgence. Then, in 2008, they released the grand finale of the Black Parade era, a CD-DVD collection of live material from the World's Tour titled The Black Parade is Dead, taking footage and audio from the massive final show in Mexico and from a smaller show in New Jersey, bringing the whole Black Parade era to an indisputable close. A collection of live videos from the Mexico City Encore titled Venzongo was released as an EP in 2009 on a bullet-shaped flash drive. They were also invited to cover the Bob Dylan song Desolation Row for the Watchmen movie soundtrack around this time. If you don't remember, The Watchmen was a pretty decent DC vigilante superhero movie before superhero movies really took off in the 2010s. The accompanying music video is set in a Watchmen alternate timeline during the 1980s, with the band performing as a Ramones-like group at a concert that is crashed by riot police when it gets too rowdy. The video is full of references to the comic, but also has some neat period details in the costuming and the use of old Marshall amplifier stacks. Though the film was a box office disappointment, which might be why it's never talked about these days, being tied to a major Hollywood blockbuster was even further confirmation that MCR were in the mainstream now. But after years of constant hard work and overexposure, that took its toll. Toro described the period after the Black Parade. We were spent, burnt, totally out of it. Being this costume band in black night after night, country after country, it was a grind. After such a grueling touring schedule, things went quiet in the My Chemical Romance camp for a while as the band took a break and worked out what to do next. When they were ready to get back to it, they hired another veteran rock producer, Brendan O'Brien, who had worked with major acts like Pearl Jam, Rage Against the Machine, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Their plan was to scale things back after the excesses of the previous album, leaving behind the high-concept, deep lore rock opera idea and the costumes and presentation that went with it. With O'Brien's encouragement, they aimed for a simpler, stripped-back approach for this album. Frank Iero was quoted saying, "It was time for us to stop being so elaborate and just make music." With a clear vision in mind and 10 new songs later, a new MCR album was ready. Then, they canned it. In a move reminiscent of the Beatles with the infamous Get Back sessions that would become the album Let It Be nearly 2 years later, My Chemical Romance listened back to what they created and didn't like it. It was a hard decision to scrap the record we made with Brendan, but in the end, it was the right decision, said Toro at the time. Despite it being a difficult and expensive move, the label supported it, and the band went back to their previous producer, Cavallo, to get them out of their funk. I can only imagine how uncomfortable that conversation must have been to start. Hey, you know that new album that you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for us to make? Yeah, we're throwing it in the trash, sorry. It wouldn't stay in the trash forever, but we'll get back to that. Back to the drawing board, instead of stripping back the theatrics, Cavallo encouraged them to expand on what they had done in their previous album, and create another concept to build around. So after a year in and out of the studio from June 2009 to July 2010, they finally had the true successor to the Black Parade ready. But that wasn't the end of this rocky road. In March of 2010, the band announced on their website that drummer Bob Breyer had left the band. The announcement came seemingly out of nowhere, with the statement saying, "This was a painful decision for all of us to make and was not taken lightly." There's been no real explanation for this sudden move, and rumors offered little idea on what happened, with the best guesses being creative differences. But Bob Breyer was not the first drummer, and his replacement, Michael Petticone, would not last long either. This band has actually kind of become known for grinding through drummers as fast as I go through bags of candy corn around Halloween. Despite all of these troubles, in September of 2010, the band released a trailer on their YouTube channel titled "Art is the Weapon." For context, this was before Art the Clown ever existed. The teaser played very much like a movie trailer for the world of this next album, and I cannot convey to you how exciting this was to see at the time. The World Contamination Tour was announced not long after, followed by the release of the lead single.
Listen up! The future is bulletproof. The aftermath is secondary. It's time to do it now and do it loud. Killjoys, make some noise!
This opening line was the perfect introduction to the band's newest alter ego, the Fabulous Killjoys. The Na 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 music video was the first glimpse at how involved the new album's narrative was going to be. Based on Way's comic book concept, it's set in the far distant post-apocalyptic future of 2019, located in the deserts surrounding the fictional Battery City, California, a place run by a megacorporation, Better Living Industries, or BLI for short. It tells the story of the Killjoys, portrayed by the band members as road warrior-like gang members, similar to the characters in the sci-fi action movie franchise Mad Max. Each member has their own character, with Gerard Way as Party Poison, Frankie Arrow as Fun Ghoul, Ray Toro as Jetstar, and Mikey Way as Cobra Kid. The gang are protecting a young girl known as Missile Kid from the Draculoids led by the Evil Chorus, played by none other than comic book legend Grant Morrison, best known for his work on comics like Batman Inc., The Invisibles, Multiversity, and All-Star Superman. Multiple chases and firefights ensue before the two gangs have a showdown, only for the Killjoys to be defeated but spared by Chorus, who tells them to keep running at the end. It's way more than a music video, pun intended. It's a short film, complete with multiple locations, special effects, stunts, car chases, futuristic costuming, and a whole heap of references. And the bright color, exaggerated characters, and science fiction theatrics were a super refreshing change-up from the funeral drag of the last album. As a way of clearing the air for a new era of the band, they couldn't have gone much harder. The music was a drastic change too. It's a more up-tempo track with a dancey beat and even throws in some synths, something that had been mostly absent from previous MCR records. Way said in an MTV interview that this was the song that made them realize that they were on the wrong track with the original recordings. All around, this was a major departure from what the band was known for. The following single, Sing, had an accompanying music video that was a direct sequel to the previous one, following what happened to the Killjoys after their defeat and the capture of the little girl. They drive through a blockade in a tunnel on their way to rescue her from Better Living headquarters, a skyscraper in Battery City. After arriving, the gang succeed in rescuing the girl, but get caught as they flee, ending in an explosive shootout in the building's lobby where the Killjoys are all cut down in battle, but the little girl manages to escape. Much like the previous video, the world building, production design, and scope all make this like a short action movie. But the music spells out how different this record was going to be too. Heavier on the electronic sounds and synths than the previous single, Sing was an indication of the direction that the band were going to take this album, a direction that not everyone was going to like. On November 22nd, 2010, MyChemicalRomance's fourth studio album, Danger Days: The True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys, was released. I love that MCR took a chance on something different, and in my opinion, it's a huge success. The look of the album with the characters, videos, and artwork fits the new sound so well, and I love the sci-fi concept and story. Its presentation, using day glow colors, laser guns, and dystopian post-apocalyptic wastelands, was neon futurism all the way through, calling on 80s pop culture references like Mad Max, Blade Runner, and RoboCop. To maintain a narrative through line, the album uses a DJ, Dr. Death Defying, as a framing device, occasionally interjecting on the record to give a traffic update or news that builds out the story. The second to last track is even an end-of-the-schedule sign-off, complete with the recitation of the national anthem. In another touch of metatextual world building, the character is voiced by Steve Rye from the band Mindless Self-Indulgence, whose bassist happens to be Lindsay, Gerard Way's wife. It's a committed approach to a concept that still holds together. It was a bold direction for a band established on a very specific look and sound, and opinions on it were mixed. The scene that made MCR famous was on the decline at this point. The Black Parade was 4 years old by then, so you would think the band changing their look and sound would be a smart choice to stay up to date, but many fans were confused by how different this was. I remember most of my friends at the time really liked it, but there was one dude that absolutely hated it. Reviews were generally favorable though, applauding the brave choices required to make the album. NME even called it the best rock record of the year, but it didn't sell as well. With the previous 2 MCR albums achieving platinum status, Danger Days is still only certified gold, and that took until 2017 to reach. Despite that, and maybe because of the lukewarm reception, promotion for the album continued for the next 2 years, with 4 other tracks from the record being used as singles. Planetary Go was the next one. It starts out as an all-electro pop track, maintaining the dance song vibe even when the guitars come in. The Queen-inflected rock of the Black Parade is gone, as is the more anguished delivery by Gerard, though the lyrics remain loaded with commentary. The music video is just concert footage, though the neon futurist aesthetic was maintained with the bright colors and retro digital kanji that accompany the screen text. Bulletproof Heart was the next single, but it didn't get a music video. It's another electro rock anthem in a similar vein to the previous singles, but added nothing new for any newcomers to latch onto. This was followed by The Only Hope for Me Is You, which also didn't receive a music video. Both got significant airplay though, and were performed on recorded live sessions for MTV and XFM in the UK. The promotional tour that accompanied the record, the World Contamination Tour, ran until 2012, and I was there. This was basically my first real concert that didn't involve sitting on a blanket at Ribfest with my parents, so this was truly the beginning of a new part of my life. I even dressed up as Party Poison for the show. Look, camera phones were not great back then, okay? On September 2nd, 2011, in the middle of this tour, the band posted on their website that Michael Petticone had been caught stealing from the band and was immediately fired. He was replaced by Jared Alexander for the remainder of the tour. On December 18th, 2011, in a move no one saw coming, the band made an appearance on the popular children's show Yo Gabba Gabba, performing Every Snowflake is Different, Just Like You for their Christmas episode. Not exactly a milestone, but it was still a cool thing for a band like MCR to do, and it is on my emo Christmas playlist. Ironically, they were not the only pop-punk band to perform on Yo Gabba Gabba. Weezer also did a track. I mean, the song is kind of a bop, but it's just weird to think back on that time period. Like, just imagine the modern day equivalent. It'd be like if Pierce the Veil did a song on Bluey. The final single to be released from Danger Days was the track The Kids from Yesterday, a bittersweet song about nostalgia, but given what was about to happen, many fans considered it to be about the band themselves. This was cemented with the music video that was a compilation of footage from the band's earliest days right up until the present. A lot of it was edited in slow motion and matched the melancholic tone, giving it the sad air of a swan song. It was a somber end to this period for the band, but a hint at what was brewing at the time. Danger Days might have received a cool reception on release, but in the intervening years, the album is now considered way ahead of its time. The neo-futurism and 80s aesthetic predicted the boom of similar content throughout the 2010s. It was released a year before the movie Drive, often seen as Patient Zero for the neon futurism revival, and a full 5 years prior to the massive success of the Mad Max revival, Fury Road, in 2015. Guitar-based artists going electro also became standard in the decade that followed, with acts like Harry Styles, Muse, and, as we've discussed, Falling in Reverse, starting out on an electric guitar and then bringing in the synths, with Muse even doing the same thing by making a retro-futurist 80s-inspired album in the form of Simulation Theory. One of the other main influences on the album comes from another source, namely Twilight. The Twilight novels arrived at the same time as the emo explosion, and to MCR's distaste, became closely tied to the band's aesthetic. So, when the inevitable movie was greenlit, MCR were the first band the producers went to for the soundtrack. It was a lot of money being offered, but they declined. This led to the new look of Danger Days, and the track Vampire Money being the clearest statement about this. Way stated, that's why the song Vampire Money is on there, because there's a lot of people chasing that fucking money. Twilight, a lot of people around here were like, please, for the love of God, do this fucking movie. But we'd moved on. Sometimes a negative influence can be better than a positive influence, and Vampire Money, with its old school punk rock sound, might just be my favorite overall MCR song. Maybe you know what they do to guys like us in prison actually, but one thing is for sure, Danger Days has aged a lot better than the Twilight movies have. Despite Danger Days being 15 years old at the time of writing, it has such a timeless quality to me. It feels so new, modern, and slick in production quality, just like when it came out. I do have one bone to pick with it though. At the beginning of the album cycle, we were promised 3 music videos for the Killjoy storyline, and all we got was Na 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 and Sing. The others, Planetary Go and The Kids from Yesterday, were just live performance videos. So they still owe us the last chapter of the trilogy. 15 years later, and I'm still waiting, and kinda salty that we never got the conclusion that we were promised. The album's biggest legacy might be something quite different though. It was during this time that the MCRmy was formed as a fan club for the band with its own website. It was described on the official MCR website as a place to meet your fellow members, sign up for the MCRmy email list, request MCRmy materials, and help spread the word about MyChem. Having a street team was nothing unique for bands of this era, but MCR was one of the most passionate ones, inspiring the creation of MCRmy blogs, Facebook groups, and other sites and communities all over the internet. Harnessing this community to help spread the word was smart, but it might have had unintended consequences, given that it was these groups that were loudest during the band's hiatus. But we'll get to that. I also feel that Danger Days did something that most albums don't by having multiple layers of subtext. I feel like there's a strong theme of extermination in Danger Days. Human extermination being compared to bug extermination in a commentary about how big corporations prioritize profits ahead of human life. From the spider on the front cover, to the characters being killed by BLI in the videos, to some of the lyrics like hit the party with a gas can and na na na, or cleaned up corporation progress dying in the process and sang. Then there's the intermission track, Jetstar and the Cobra Kid / Traffic Report, where the radio DJ, Dr. Death-Defying, gives this update.
Bad news from the zones, tumbleweeds. It looks like Jetstar and the Cobra Kid had a clap with an exterminator that went all Costa Rica and got themselves ghosted, dusted out on Route Guano.
This is followed several tracks later by the song Destroya, where Party Poison literally makes the insect comparison with the lyrics, don't believe what they say, we're dead flies in the summertime, and I'm sick down from the bones to the other side, red mob, we insects hide. King Rat on the streets in another life, they laugh, we don't think it's funny. And finally, there's this constant reference to the bomb throughout the entire album, and the whole thing ends with a super low bassy explosion sound. So I think that the bomb that they're talking about is like a bug bomb, and they are the bugs. I've always interpreted Vampire Money to exist outside of the album's narrative, with Gerard addressing each of the band members by name at the beginning rather than their Killjoy alter ego names, completing the through line between the bug extermination metaphor being a symbol of real life extermination. Kind of like how blood took place in the real world rather than the Black Parade afterlife. But hey, that's just a theory. Considering all this, Danger Days was a big swing for MCR. The problem with being ahead of the times is that it's the same as being behind the times. No one knows what to make of it. I mean, I did. I enjoy the heck out of the album. The album got better critical appraisal since its release, but it is still seen as being lower on the MCR totem pole by many. Whatever your opinion, another ambitious project that MCR committed to fully, and for that, it deserves praise. As a side note, a special edition of Danger Days came with a mostly forgotten mini EP called The Mad Gear and Missile Kid, named after another pair of characters in the Danger Days universe. Mad Gear is the frontman of the band who had a caffeine-induced vision of himself and a sentient weapon on stage, which is implied to be Missile Kid, the little girl that they saved from Better Living Industries. As described by Eero, it's basically what the Killjoys are listening to in the car as they're having those gun battles. Essentially, this is another alter ego band that exists within the world of the Killjoys. The EP cover features the same logo seen in the music videos on Way's jacket. The whole thing is only 6 minutes long and has a similar sound to the rest of the album, but is another example of MCR committing to the bits and world building by doing what they do best. Okay, in early 2012, the band began work on a 5th studio album. They recruited Doug McKean, who had engineered their last 2 albums, to produce it, and even had a working title of The Paper Kingdom. But after the release of Danger Days, Way said, despite years of sobriety following some serious substance abuse and alcohol problems, he relapsed. Way described the dark place that he was in. I started to face the hypothetical reality of my daughter Bandit not having a father. I started taking that seriously, thinking I want her to have a dad, a guy that's present. Because one way or another, either by death or by asylum, she's gonna be fatherless if I keep this up. As a result, the band struggled with cohesion as they began recording. Knowing this recording process would take a lot longer than they thought, the band would revisit the initial recordings of that shelved album that they recorded prior to Danger Days. From October 2012 until February 2013, My Chemical Romance released 2 songs a month, all taken from the abandoned sessions with Brendan O'Brien back in 2009. Each song was only released digitally and as a 7-inch vinyl. They would eventually be compiled into an album that they titled Conventional Weapons. It was another innovative approach to a commercial release for the band, but was largely unsupported, with no songs getting music videos and only limited radio promotion. Despite the almost dismissive way it was released, Weapons does have its fans, with Kerrang calling the compilation some of the band's best work. I sense that might be wishful thinking. The initial plan for these tracks was to take it back to the start, and though it doesn't capture the sound of bullets, it does go back to basics by focusing more on making rock music over focusing on theatricality and storylines. Way said at the time, over the years that we've been hearing ourselves live and hearing us on records, we kind of prefer the live. There's more of a garage feel and more energy. I'd like to capture some of that finally. That's the goal for the next one. The resulting tracks have more in common with the mid-2000s indie rock sound than their previous work. The record is full of spiky, angular guitars, and Gerard experimenting with his vocal delivery. Tracks like The World Is Ugly, with its octave guitar and Way's uncontrolled yet musical vocals, almost lean more towards late-period White Stripes rather than the rest of the emo sound MCR were often associated with. Which makes sense considering that emo was never a label Gerard wanted in the first place. Without a concept for this album, and without a unique narrative or intrinsic aesthetic, the songs are left to speak for themselves. I don't dislike the sound or really any of the tracks on this, but it's sad that it ended up being the last of their legacy. There's no alter ego or story here, and a lot of the tracks are recycled ideas from stuff that we've already heard. Mostly lyrics that got used on Danger Days instead, but also stuff pulled all the way back from I Brought You Bullets. The album doesn't really have its own identity in the way that the others do. It's led some, including me, to believe that it was released to fulfill a contractual obligation to the label for one more album. Clearly, the band doesn't care about it all that much. It's a specifically music-focused album for a band that frequently, and especially during these recording sessions, said that they felt creatively spent and directionless. In the midst of this staggered release schedule, this belief may have, at last, proved true. On May 19th, 2012, My Chemical Romance played the Bamboozle Festival in their home state of New Jersey, a performance that would turn out to be their last for a very long time. During that performance, Way recalled looking out to the ocean and feeling like he was acting, and not performing honestly. This feeling of detachment, combined with both he and his brother Mikey's struggles with substance abuse, were causing serious burnout. My Chemical Romance as a band was standing on weak legs, even if nobody else really suspected it. They were working on the next album, set to be called The Paper Kingdom. In the band's own words, it was very dark. The concept for the album spells that out, telling the story of a support group of children who had died fighting a witch in the woods. But Way described the creative drive just not being present. I was basically finding anything else to do besides write music. Apparently, a lot of work for the album was done, but the will to complete it wasn't there. Much like the Patients, the band was on life support, and Gerard ultimately decided to pull the plug. On March 22nd, 2013, a date that now lives in infamy in the MCR fandom, a statement on their website declared My Chemical Romance were over. A vigil on birds and glass was actually posted a year after that moment when the split was made official. The initial statement explaining the split was short and sweet. Being in this band for the last 12 years has been a true blessing. And now, like all great things, it has come time for it to end. Thank you for your support and for being part of the adventure. Fan reaction was swift and devastated. Most refused to accept the breakup and were so vocal that another longer statement by Way was required. In it, Gerard describes his experience the morning after the band's dissolution, when a bird flew into the house and repeatedly crashed into the windows trying to escape. Gerard, his wife Lindsay from Mindless Self-Indulgence, and his daughter helped the bird escape. I was no longer sad. I didn't realize it, but I stopped being sad the minute that bird had come into my life, because there was something that needed doing, a small vessel to aid and an order to keep. I closed the door. I decided I would write the letter I always knew I would. A metaphor for Gerard's own feelings towards being trapped under the obligations that he had created for himself, he goes on to describe what he calls a doomsday device they had built within the band, essentially an oath to blow it all up when the time comes. You should know it in your being if you listen to the truth inside you, and the voice inside became louder than the music. Then he describes the New Jersey show in 2012 where he felt like he was going through the motions, and the increasing prevalence of the voice inside him overpowering the joy that he used to feel from being a musician ever since then. Finally, he thanks his fans and those he shared the stage with before saying goodbye. Since I am bad with goodbyes, I refuse to let this be one. But I will leave you with one last thing. My Chemical Romance is done, but it can never die. It is alive inside of me, in the guys, and it is alive inside of all of you. I always knew that, and I think you did too. Because it is not a band, it is an idea. Many still didn't believe it and required repeated confirmation. Some denied it outright, but most were just shocked and devastated at the announcement. Others, however, came to their own conclusions about the split, believing there were altercations and bad blood between the bandmates. Conclusions the band members were quick to deny. Regardless, rumors about a more acrimonious breakup continued for years. Remember that Gerard ship that was rumored way back around the time of their second album? Well, the breakup really kicked it up a notch. The depth of this imagined relationship varies from person to person, but the general thesis is that Gerard and Frankie Arrow were were more than friends, this theory took on more weight after the split because some fans assumed that this was the reason that the band broke up. Some people cite lyrics from Iero's solo work and interview quotes to build the case for the ship, but it's probably no more than wishful fanfiction from teen fangirls. The final send-off was a greatest hits collection titled May Death Never Stop You, which featured the infamous Attic demos and the previously unreleased track Fake Your Death. It came out exactly a year after the breakup in 2014. There was also a music video for Fake Your Death that zoomed into this bust of what I assume is supposed to be Black Parade era Gerard, and inside the statue we see a montage of moments from the most iconic videos of their 12-year run. To me, it always seemed like a hint that MCR was planning on getting back together at some point. I had just lived through a couple of my favorite bands, System of a Down and Fall Out Boy, coming back after long periods of hiatus. Going out with a song and music video for a track titled Fake Your Death, all while posting a final statement reading My Chemical Romance 2001 to 2013 seemed like a hint that the death of the band was being faked as well. Couple that with the fact that their last true album, Danger Days, was set in the not too distant future of 2019, and I had a theoretical date for their return hidden in their music. May Death Never Stop You also included a re-release of the single Sing in aid of the disaster relief following the Tohoku earthquake in Japan. Retitled Sing It for Japan, the song was re-recorded with new instrumentation and a new music video of the band in the studio intercut with images of the disaster. It showed that even if they were over as a band, MCR were still making a difference. But after that, the band went quiet for several years, and its members pursued other creative avenues. Frankie Iero stayed close with other members of the band, performing with keyboardist James DeWeese in Death Spells and with Ray Toro in Reggie and the Full Effect. He then went on to be signed himself under the name Frankie Iero and the Celebration, and released the album Stomach Aches, which featured the former MCR drummer Jared Alexander. Mikey Way formed the band Electric Century with Sleep Station vocalist David Dibiak, and Ray Toro began releasing songs as a solo artist. Gerard, however, was the most prolific, releasing a solo album Hesitant Alien on September 19th of 2014. Carrying on a sound that was a mixture of Danger Days and conventional weapons, and presented with music videos and an album cover seemingly inspired by David Bowie's 80s persona of the Thin White Duke, it was still only a marginal success. Way's real triumph was in returning to his first love, comic books. He had seemingly maintained a close relationship with figures in the industry throughout his MCR days. This can be seen in the band's work on the Watchmen movie and the featuring of Grant Morrison in their music videos for Danger Days. One of Gerard's comics would spawn a franchise perhaps even bigger than My Chemical Romance itself. Gerard Way had kept writing throughout the band's heyday, producing the Umbrella Academy series, which went on to be a popular Netflix series of the same name.
I have adopted 6 children, gifted with abilities far beyond the ordinary. I give you the Umbrella Academy.
Gerard also founded DC's Young Animal imprint in 2016, which published series like Doom Patrol, The Changing Girl, and Cave Carson. He also produced a companion comic for Danger Days and contributed to the Marvel Universe, writing for the Edge of Spider-Verse series and creating the character Penny Parker that would go on to be featured in the Into the Spider-Verse movie in 2018. But it wasn't all a smooth ride for the former band members of MCR. While on tour with his backing band, The Patients, Frankie Iero's bus was involved in a traffic accident which forced him to cancel the remainder of his tour. This enforced pause, alongside working with his former bandmates, might have prompted him to reevaluate things. Normally, you would think when a band is split up, their careers go on pause, but something interesting happened in the case of MCR. If anything, their fandom only grew stronger. The MCRmy took on a life of its own at this point, creating a crazy level of devotion to the band. These blogs and Tumblr pages had always been a home to those who loved the band, and posts about MCR only increased after the split. In the immediate aftermath, a hashtag that had been around since the Black Parade era began to circle social media again. MCR saved my life, which I always find cringe whenever people say stuff like that. The sentiment is that the person was able to find joy in the band during a difficult part of their life. But come on, it's not like hundreds of thousands of people would have died if Hang 'em High didn't come out. Like, real talk, this is exactly why Gerard doesn't like being labeled emo. But still, it was a big movement, so much so that entire articles were written about it. Way's fearless need to talk about his own mental health struggles reminded many fans of their own experiences, who often cited MCR as the reason to keep going. This tag never went away, and instead only became more prolific in the years after the band broke up. One unexpected way to keep going might have manifested in the way that the Paper Kingdom came to be viewed by the community. Way implied he would come back to the project one day, and some fans took that as a definite promise. The more years that passed without it materializing, the more it achieved a mythic status as the great lost album that some fans assume is still coming. This led one user on a forum claiming to have the full album recordings, even including short clips, that they would sell to anyone willing to pay 15 grand. I'm pretty sure that was a scam, but Billy Cobb has a cool song inspired by the Paper Kingdom concept. It wasn't just that though. I think there were a number of factors that contributed to the band gaining even more fans after the breakup. Nostalgia was a big factor. During the band's heyday, MCR were big, but at the end of the day still fell under the category of alternative music. And there's a reason it's called alternative. It's an alternate to the most popular stuff. In December 2014, an event called Emo Night LA was started, which was essentially a DJ set that catered towards fans of emo and pop punk. I was there in the early days and saw this thing blow up from a small underground club to becoming one of the hottest events in Hollywood, with expensive tickets and off-brand imitators. Helena, Welcome to the Black Parade, and teenagers were a staple of these events, and it started drawing crowds outside the types you might have found me going to shows with in high school. Emo was somehow hitting the mainstream. And the same was happening with the defunct My Chemical Romance, only quietly behind the scenes. This all combined with the real boom in social media in the 2010s, which saw nostalgic posts from scenesters with old tattoos, old zines, and even people who never left the style behind getting big numbers of likes. Along with a growing movement for mental health advocacy online, which led many users back to MCR, whose lyrics were, and still are, used as a virtual version of the shampoo bottle microphone. And speaking of cringe, a little website came along called Musically, which you may know as The Talk. TikTok's ability to make old songs go viral meant fans of MCR could use the band's music for their posts, giving younger users fresh exposure. There was also a vinyl revival specifically catered to emo in the mid-2010s, which, combined with the overall revival of vinyl, led to it outselling CDs and reaching its highest ever sales figures in 2025. In short, love for the music of the era and the scene, especially My Chemical Romance, never dimmed, but only got stronger over the next decade. To fan these flames, in 2016, the band cryptically posted on their website about something called MCRXX, which many believed was a reunion announcement. But they were left unsatisfied when it was revealed to be a deluxe remastered edition of The Black Parade called The Black Parade / Living with Ghosts, featuring an extra disc of demos and live tracks. It was basically just a cash-in on the new fandom, but it did show that the growth in popularity wasn't unnoticed. After that, everything went quiet again, but calls for a reunion only got louder. 2019 was the year that many of us speculated that My Chemical Romance would announce their return, picking up where they left off after Danger Days, which was set in the future fictional year of 2019. I always imagined the clock striking 0 on New Year's Eve and Na 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 instantly blaring from all the speakers around the city as MCR fans flooded the streets, but that didn't happen. However, we had a whole year for something to maybe be announced. But after 10 months, it wasn't exactly top of mind for me. On Halloween 2019, a new Instagram account for My Chemical Romance appeared, along with a general refresh of the band's content across the web, all of which pushed speculation into overdrive. Then, sure enough, the band posted the image of 2 embracing statues, with the title Return and a date and venue details. The show sold out almost immediately, which kind of annoyed me because if there's any day that I'm not going to be paying attention to MCR social media, it's Halloween. Halloween is for doing Halloween stuff. But later, a series of cryptic trailers were released to the band's YouTube channel announcing a North American tour. The 3 short films, An Offering, MCRXX, and A Summoning, were a cinematic tease, and a knowing tribute to their fandom that gave us the next clues about MCR's future. After years of media referring to MCR's following as a cult, the 3 new videos depicted that literally, with An Offering showing a hooded and masked group convening in the woods around a pentagram, and MCRXX showing one of these members suiting up. A Summoning was the most explicit, being a full 10-minute short film. It starts with the same footage as MCRXX of a man dressing up in his robe before performing a seance with a Ouija board that gives him instructions before he is chased by Draculoid thugs in white suits. Running away from his pursuers, he ends up in a Blade-influenced club with vampires chowing down on other patrons. He is promptly chased out of there by the Draculoid thugs into a church where he sees a blood-splattered couple at the altar in a pose eerily similar to the cover for 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge and a woman dancer straight out of the Helena video. Sure enough, the Draculoids show up and chase him to a hospital where a heavy-breathing patient is covered by a sheet. I think you get the idea. It's a tour of MCR's back catalog of albums. After fleeing the Draculoids again, he ends up out in the Killjoys desert from Danger Days, then he wakes up in a circle surrounded by cultists. It seems to have been an elaborate indoctrination that leads to him standing in an empty arena, the obvious next step for the band. With speculation at a high, it was revealed that they actually got back together in 2017 and had been working on the reunion announcement ever since. Anticipation was at a fever pitch after the reunion show, but fans would sadly have to wait a little bit longer. Actually, a lot longer. Because, after all, this was the start of 2020, which represents an awkward stall in momentum in pretty much every band history video that I've produced to this point. After 2 long years of COVID, fans were treated to a brand new single, Foundations of Decay, on May 12th, 2022. A dark and heavy track that feels like a blend of Danger Days electronics and Black Parade drama, fueling more speculation that a new album was imminent. Some speculated that Foundations of Decay was the start of a new project, which fans began referring to as MCR5 because Conventional Weapons is a compilation album and it doesn't count. Others believed the Paper Kingdom would finally be built, but no announcement ever came. The reunion tour that had been postponed for the last 2 years eventually started on May 16th, 2022. I saw them in December during one of their 4 days performing at the Forum in Los Angeles, a much bigger venue than Chicago's Aragon Ballroom where I saw them the first time. And I thought the band was great. It was good to see a more mature but no less energetic MCR powering through a greatest hits set, which heavily leaned on the album that started their popularity, 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge. Though I was kinda shocked that they didn't play anything off the first record. 2022 was the 20-year anniversary of Bullets, and yet it got literally no love. I guess it makes sense though, because this show was initially planned to take place in 2020. They did play Bury Me in Black, so that was a fun treat. While the band was great, this was my first experience interacting with the new fandom, and I felt that they were kinda low energy. I mean, I was going crazy, but a lot of people around me were just standing around. I guess that's something that comes with the territory of becoming so big that you're selling out arenas on multiple nights. You're gonna have people who are there just because it's the popular thing to do and not so much because they love the band. It's a bittersweet thing. It was an MCR audience, but not the one that gave us things like Gerard or MCRmy back in the mid-2000s. But I was just happy to get to see a band from my adolescence again after waiting for 11 years. The tour was a triumph, and MCR remained as vital as when they first arrived. After a short break, it was announced that My Chemical Romance would headline the When We Were Young festival in 2024 by playing the Black Parade in its entirety. For a variety of reasons, I had already seen the reunion tour and I saw a lot of their day one set the night before from my hotel room, and the fact that they overlapped with Escape the Fate, who I'd never seen live, I only caught the second half of their set. And I feel like I made the right choice there. It was a pretty rough performance. The theatricality that makes the Black Parade special was pretty much absent, and Gerard, from what I could tell, seemed drunk and he was slurring his words, which was seemingly confirmed by a video from night one where he fell over on stage during This Is How I Disappear. Hopefully that's not an indicator of the frontman falling back into his self-destructive old ways going forward. Despite this, they had some momentum coming out of the festival. As expected, a lot of people showed up for their Black Parade set. So almost immediately afterwards, the band released a teaser trailer. It featured a military leader marching the decadent halls of a building as a crowd chants outside, ending with the figure stepping out onto the balcony and the announcement of the Long Live the Black Parade tour. This teaser was followed by 2 more teasers, featuring a brutal opera performance and a feast for a Doberman. As always, speculation was high. Did this mean more music? A sequel to the Black Parade? Was it the reveal of the Paper Kingdom? Were they back for good? It ended up being a no on all of those, but the tour still had plenty to say. The Long Live the Black Parade tour featured the band performing 2 sets, one being the album in its entirety, and the other being a selection of songs from other albums. Unlike When We Were Young, the production for the tour is fully theatrical, featuring sets that reflect the teaser trailers and updated versions of the Black Parade costumes. Each concert features a mock election, with the audience given cards to vote on whether or not to execute 4 people. The plot of the stage production is based on the fictional dictatorship of Drog, ruled by the great immortal dictator. I do really appreciate them doing a new storyline this time, because I initially kind of had mixed feelings on just doing another Black Parade tour, because it kind of cheapens the impact of the Black Parade is Dead, which was supposed to be their last time performing the album in full. But I feel for the new generation of fans who probably want their chance to see the iconic record play live. Not sure where they're gonna find $1,000 for a ticket though. So giving us some new lore and characters helped it go over better for me. A national anthem of Drog titled Over the Fields is played at the start of each show. The Black Parade themselves have been renamed as the Grand Immortal Dictator's National Band and perform to please the dictator. The band would also play an unreleased track, War Beneath the Rain, which many suspect will eventually be another single. It's one hell of a comeback and proves that MCR are just as ambitious with their world building as ever. My Chemical Romance are back, and despite a festival misstep, show little in the way way of signs of slowing down. It seems more and more likely that a new album is eventually going to happen, and for the millions who joined the fandom while the band was post-mortem, that's gotta be a dream they'd never thought would come true. MCR are a band that came from nowhere and completely changed not just the subculture, but reached popular culture at large. They reintroduced high-concept, multi-platform productions into the mainstream and did it so successfully that they're still touring their most famous example. They blended genres, media, and generations to create something far bigger than themselves, all while maintaining a care for their community and an honesty about their own experiences. It looks like Gerard achieved the goal he set out with over 20 years ago on one of the darkest days in his home country's history. He and his band have made a difference. If you enjoyed this little intersection of Memory Lane and Cemetery Drive, check out that video on the left for more band history episodes on the legends of the pop-punk genre. And stay plugged in by subscribing to Pumpkin Metal for more than just punk and metal, let the bell toll for notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, mic drop.